Who's got the talent and who uses that talent to win football games and championships in college football? And how should we project it toward 2021? We got Steve Dace on the line from Michigan Podcast. Please join him on, again, Michigan Podcast is one of the better stops you will make on YouTube. Steve, how you doing today?
Good to see you, brother. How you been, Mark?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you jumping on board here to, again, go through what's become an off-season ritual first for you, and now coming on here to explain your team total talent rankings.
So I started these in 2017 when I started getting more formally involved in win total predictions, projections, and wagering. Because what I was finding, and this has been true for quite a while, the old way we used to do previews where guys like you and I go buy all the magazines in the 1st of June, and read them all month long and chart how many returning starters and stuff were coming back. And returning starters just is irrelevant now for most programs, especially at the elite level when you're the teams that are competing for national championships. They're just recruiting at a level that it's just not relevant. If you're more of a developmental program, like if that has high goals, like a Wisconsin, then you'd rather have 16 returning starters than 7 or 8, right? Because you're not necessarily recruiting the guys that look like Tarzan right out of high school, but need 2 or 3 years of development. But that's just not the case, throughout college football anymore, especially when so many freshmen come in physically in better shape than we've ever seen, so many early enrollees. And then you've got sub-packaging, like what you see in the NFL, specialists. So who really is a starter and who isn't? And so a few years ago, Bill Connolly, now at ESPN, came up with an analytic based on production. And he would base these things, his projections for the following season on returning production, meaning here's the guys that you have coming back that have proven themselves. Here's how good your team looks to be based on what those guys have done. And that's, I think, a much better way of doing it. And Bill parlayed that in a gig from SB Nation to ESPN. So clearly I'm not alone in thinking that. But that when you're betting a futures market, Mark, you want to get ahead of the market, right? You're not looking to find out necessarily how good the teams are right now based on what they've shown. You really want to know how good the teams could be based on what they haven't. So how do we do that? How do we measure potential? And I thought about this for a while, and a few years ago, 5 years ago now, I came up with these team total talent ratings by looking at the composite recruiting rankings at 24/7, which takes into account what they and ESPN and Rivals all think. So I look at your last 3 classes because we don't play a lot of fifth-year seniors, or 4 classes, because we don't play a lot of fifth-year seniors anymore. But if they're in the 2 deep, I do account for them. This year, we do account for super seniors. I've got all the super senior COVID year guys all already updated in what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. And so you get 5 points if he's a 5-star recruit, 4 points if he's a 4-star, et cetera. And then what we do to account for programs that win a lot of games, and there's a lot of them in our league in the Big Ten. Wisconsin, I already mentioned, but Iowa would be in that group. Michigan State under Mark D'Antonio, those sort of developmental programs, as guys progress and get better and outplay their recruiting ranking, I bump them up a star. All right, so the classic Kirk Ferentz line, we recruit guys that look like 2 stars, and when they leave here, 4 years later, they look like 5 stars, okay? I mean, those guys get moved up as they prove themselves throughout the course of their careers. And I don't drop guys because just potential is so mercurial at this age that sometimes the light bulb just comes on with guys in their last year. No one saw Joey Burrow come in as arguably the greatest season by a college quarterback ever going into his senior year. If I'd have come on here, Mark, and predicted that 2 summers ago, you'd had me drug tested, okay? So I don't drop guys down that haven't met their potential yet because at that age, sometimes guys just are late bloomers for whatever reason. So that's how these talent ratings are accumulated. It accounts for the transfer portal. I stay up to date with that on a daily basis because I want to take my rankings of potential. These are not a power rating, okay? So I'm not ranking teams like if I was going to say, who's going to win this game? I'm ranking ceilings. I want to know how good a team could be because I'm looking at futures markets and where I think I can find soft spots in the market where a team's overall roster is on the ascendancy or team's overall roster is on the way down. How can I get ahead of that? For my power ratings, I'll take what Bill Connolly does with my rankings and I'll come up with a power rating with other information, but with those two metrics, and I'll do that later this summer.
Because it could be argued that if even though this is a worthy metric here, certainly, and when you talk about returning starters, I still think that there's some value to that, but you've just figured out a better way, so there's no reason not to go with a better way, but there still is value to the returning starters. But in terms of the prediction side of this, if a program continues to underachieve, what is the value in measuring that ceiling for Texas, for USC, for Michigan, if they continue to underachieve? If you're going to give them an overinflated score, not you, but they have supplied you with the metrics for an overinflated score that may lead you to project a win total or a particular game successfully for them, that they will continue to disappoint.
Well, that's what goes into making a power rating, what you just said. Okay. And so, like, if I was doing a power rating, just to let people in on my own thought process when I do my preview every year, I look at my measurement of potential. I look at Connolly's measurement of production, because those things mine's a little more subjective because I'm giving a bonus for a guy I think has outperformed his recruiting ranking. But when I do that very limited, meaning here's how I did it this year. You had to be a guy that appeared on either the first, second, or third all-conference team in your conference. That for me, that was the minimum threshold for me to move you up a recruiting ranking. It wasn't just good enough to like be a starter on the team. All right. So I'm a little more subjective than Connolly, who's just running numbers of production and spewing out a ranking based on that. So I look at, when I'm making my power ratings, I look at potential, which is what I measure, production, which is what Connolly measures. I then have head coach rankings. This is how I account for underachievement. All right. When a certain head coach at a certain program keeps underachieving, well, I'm not, on paper, Michigan has 9 or 10 win talent. I don't believe there's much of a chance they're getting to 9 or 10 wins this year. So, because I'm going to impose what Harbaugh's track record is of underachievement upon that. And so if you come up with enough factors, now not too many, because as the late Keith Jackson used to say, analyzing can be paralyzing. All right. But you come up with enough factors to try to mitigate those kinds of objections you're talking about. So again, and this has been very fruitful. This prospect has been for me in the past. The first year I did this, Georgia had the number 2 roster. They were preseason, I think, number 14 or 17 that year. They were one pass away from winning the national championship. All right. So I think last year, 5 of the top 11 rosters on my list ended up winning their Power 5 conference. The year before, 6 of the top 11, or 5 of the top 10, because you only have 5. 5 of the top 10 ended up winning their Power 5 conference. So this does a great job of, last year I had Indiana with a top 25 overall roster in the country, which sort of gave a framework for, okay, they got a lot of guys that they've developed coming back. They're kind of ready to win now. And so that's what this is looking for, potential. You look at a team like Auburn. That's a team with its name recognition and the way it recruits. It's probably going to have a win total of at least 7. My numbers say if that win total is anything above 6, hammer the under, because of the amount of massive attrition that they have suffered. They're just above Vanderbilt overall in my team total talent ratings of the SEC. See, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for floors and ceilings, potential.
I'm sure you get a lot of feedback from people that don't quite grasp it. That does speak to the rankings or the power rankings type of mentality, and then that needs to be re-explained. I've always felt that I had a pretty good grasp on this, but I'm going to apply. I'm going to make one comment, and then I'm going to apply what I believe back to the Georgia example of 2017. So basically, this is a measurement of 3/4 generally. I'm speaking within percentage points, 3/4 of what we've already seen from a particular team, meaning that the roster is composed of 4 classes generally. Mm-hmm. And so we have seen roughly for most of these teams, unless the coaching is extremely and the program is extremely capable at developing, or wanton in that area where they are underachieving. We have seen this play out about 3/4 of the way already.
Mm-hmm.
And the other quarter is kind of a projection.
Yes.
In the Georgia example, so yeah, came within a pass of winning the national championship, had arguably the best team in the country. Okay. So you had them rated number 2, which was dead on. They were preseason, in that 15 range. You're telling me that roster that was recruited by Mark Richt, mostly, maybe one class was Kirby Smart's, that was, I think Mark Richt was recruiting somewhere. He was all over the place, but generally in that like 3 to 10 range is where he was. He had some really great classes. He was back in the lower portion of the top 10 at other times, but he went as high as 3. He was in that range. But those guys had performed for Mark Richt, and in that first season for Kirby Smart, which was only an 8-5 campaign, enough to lift them. That they're recruiting. Basically, this starts out as a recruiting analysis.
Yes.
That's the base of it.
That's exactly right. Yes.
And then you adjust based on performance.
What you're defining is why Mark Richt got canned. Okay. Because they had all that talent there. And in Kirby, only in year 2 under Kirby Smart with a true freshman quarterback, they were within one play of winning it. Now you know why Mark Richt got canned. That's the answer. That's really what this metric tells, because it does reveal who underachieves. All right. I mean, I think Texas has been in the top 12 of these ratings all 5 years I have done this. Okay. So, I mean, you have one option could be that all 3 recruiting services really just suck at it. Auburn and Michigan have been the most consistent underachievers in this metric for 5 years. So and Texas would then be a close third. We could come to the conclusion that Auburn, Texas, and Michigan recruits are just uniquely poorly evaluated by these recruiting services. All right. They're really good at this. And then the minute a kid commits to Auburn, Michigan, and Texas, they just suddenly suck. That's an option, probably not the right one. Or it could be why Auburn and Texas, Texas is on its 3rd head coach since I started doing this. Auburn is on its 2nd. Michigan will likely soon be on its 2nd as well. All right. That I think bears itself out in these numbers. The amount of this is, let's use a business term here. These ratings measure the opportunity cost of wagering on a team. All right. The cost of wagering for them to succeed, the cost of wagering for them to fail. That's what these are really measuring, is the opportunity cost. So you go back to that 2017 Georgia team. I think their win total that year was 8.5 or 9. I had them, which is about what a team ranked in the 15 range in the top 25 would have for a win total. If you bet my ratings and bet them at number 2, I mean, you crushed that. That you understood the opportunity cost, the value. I remember 3 seasons ago now, 2018. I had LSU with the 6th most talented roster in the country. Their win total that year was 6. Everybody thought Ed Orgeron was canned, fired. They opened the season up against a suddenly resurgent Miami. And I just told everybody that followed my ratings, you have to bet the over on LSU just on value. Yeah, we don't know what a Joe Burrow is, who the hell this guy is. The guy, couldn't make it at Ohio State. We don't know how good. No one's ever heard of a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't have a clue. I just know this. I'm getting a win total of 6 with the 6th most talented roster. I have to vote over on that just on principle, just blindly. Well, first Labor Day night of the year, what did they do to Miami in that first game, right? That ends up being a 10-win team. They won a New Year's Six bowl game. See, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the flaws and the holes in the futures market with a rating like this.
So, when you either for the bettors out there that predict games and then go out there and lay some money on those games based on whether they're a glass half full person or glass half empty person, they typically come away thinking, I'm pretty good at this. When if they don't keep a record of it, they may not really be that good at it, because what's standing out in their brain is, I took that +7 there outright as a money line winner, and I got that 2 weeks ago, and the achievements stand out, and maybe they're not quite as good. And then on the flip side, those negative people may be a little bit better than they think. For you, of course, you're going to look over your top 25, and then at the end of the season have kind of a thought as to how well did I do this year. Have you put a metric to measure how well you've done? Okay.
Yeah, because when I do my power ratings in the summertime, I'm gonna have a spreadsheet of every team's units, what I have their coach rated, where I have their depth. That's this talent rating. When I do the power rating, this is only going to be one column on that power rating that will then determine what my top 25 will be when my preview comes out, which is a projection of where I think the teams will be at the end of the year. This again is for win total future bets. In the win total future best bets I've given on my Patreon page the last 5 years, based on this metric, we're at like 69.7% or something like that. It's right under 70% accuracy in the win total best bets that we have given based on these potential rankings.
Steve Day's Michigan podcast. You can catch him right there. Also, his podcast he releases each week, Bigger 10 on the Big Ten Conference, football and basketball. So I'm going to go to these particular teams. And again, we advise you to go to Michigan Podcast. The release this week had the review of the rankings, and where else can they find them? Anywhere else?
I update these every now and then on my Patreon page as well, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast.
This is always a curious one for me, Steve, because it came up, I believe, last year. Cal at number 16. So they haven't achieved much on the field. They're generally 500 under Justin Wilcox. The recruiting rankings, I can't say off the top of my head, but I'm guessing they've been in the 30s.
Which in the Pac-12 has kind of been like third or fourth, frankly.
True.
Yeah.
So where's that coming from? A 16th ranking for Cal.
Huge amount of super seniors returning for Cal. A lot of upperclassmen. One of the things this ranking does is rewards teams that keep coaches because you have the least amount of roster transition. What we're seeing right now with the early signing period is teams that do coaching hirings are getting creamed in the recruiting rankings that first year with the early signing period. It just doesn't give a coach like any time at all to try to hold on to the class. And so you have Justin Wilcox has been a consistent presence there. They also bring back, and I think if you look at Cal and Bill Connolly's returning production numbers, I think they're 11th in the country, which is indicative of the amount of heavy returnees. So I think Cal, I have them at 288 points. Now, not all 288 points are equal, right? You can have 288 points because you're bringing back a lot of pretty good players, or you can have 288 points because you're only bringing back 10 or 11 starters, but two of them are like, a Heisman Trophy and Outland Trophy candidates. You see what I'm trying to say? So for Cal, like I wouldn't, based on that metric, even though they have a top 20, I wouldn't put them in my top 25 as a power rating. But what I would be doing is, can I get a win total of 6 or lower with Cal based on how poorly they played last year? If I can, I'm hammering that puppy because their numbers are up. They had so many COVID problems last year. Remember, the first game of the year got moved to a Sunday, and it was just the entire season for Cal was a mess last year. They still have Chase Garbers back. Bill Musgrave now gets an entire offseason to install his offense. He didn't have any of that last year. So what those rankings tell you is, here's what you want to do when you look at these ratings. Jot down some teams that look like outliers to you. Like you jump to Cal right away, right? Make a mental note of that. And then any day now when the win totals come out, all right, those are the teams you immediately look for because you want to pounce. So you get a win total on Cal that's 5.5 or 6, man, you pounce on that over. That'll be one of my best bets if that turns out to be one of those win totals. I'm not picking Cal to win the Pac-12. I'm not picking them to finish 16th at the end of the year. What I'm saying is, though, that's a team whose roster is poised to overachieve based on the market perception.
You're updating these numbers pretty consistently, and Cal jumped 2 spots, or actually descended 2 spots from number 14 to 16. I wouldn't expect that there would be much movement.
Post-spring transfer portal. And keep in mind, look at the point totals there, Mark. A lot of those teams in that range are so close together.
Are so close. Gotcha.
At 3 to 6 points, meaning you lose 1 3-star, 1 5-star transfer, and it just around into different spots.
I knew it was all transfer portal, but I wouldn't expect it to move a team at this stage of the game. UCLA at 17. We could go on and on with this. That Texas, USC, Michigan triumvirate. underachieving at 11, 12, and 13 in the nation. Isolating on the Big Ten here, Northwestern, of course, last in the league. Now, they will probably down cycle, most people expect.
Yep. They've been
year.
last every year, by the way, in terms of the overall roster depth. Last every year.
It's phenomenal.
Well, you have to look at it. Well, first of all, Pat Fitzgerald's really good at this, number one. But number two, then you got to. So what I have that I don't share with the public, because if I did that, there'd be no point in going to my Patreon page. What I have that I don't share with the public is I have this all broken down by class. Okay. And the reason I want to do it that way is because, again, not all 225 their point totals are the same. That's not much different than what Northwestern gets every year in this. But like last year, the bulk of those points were fourth and fifth year players. See what I'm saying? And so that meant that was going to be a cycle up year for Northwestern, because that was where their talent was concentrated. Those were guys that they'd spent 3 to 5 years developing. This year, that is not the case. This is a cycle down year for Northwestern. Their fourth and fifth year numbers in their roster are down. It's closer to where it was in 2019 when they went 1-8 in the league. Now, I think Ryan Helinski will be a better quarterback than Hunter Johnson based on what I saw at South Carolina. So I don't think they'll, bottom out at that level. But Northwestern should be a team that if you get any win total higher than 6, you should be playing the under in that win total.
And the starting guard and the starting quarterback, for example, are weighted exactly the same.
From a talent perspective, yes. The questions you're asking me are all like from a power rating perspective. But from a roster perspective, yeah. I mean, if I put Baker Mayfield on Louisiana Tech, is he a Heisman Trophy winner? Are they in the college football playoff? No. Now, I agree with you that quarterback from a power rating standpoint is the most important position in all of college football, but there's also 21 other guys. And if the talent around that quarterback is above average or mediocre, it's not as if that suddenly is going to make that team a top 10 or 15 team.